We'll go down the steps to the second floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and then meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, you can please call 911 and notify staff at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator, that's going to be a word I'm going to stumble, defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue, and a fire extinguisher is located in the corridor along the side of the dais just behind the wall. You can see it over there in the corner if you're in the room. For microphone use, just for hybrid meeting, if you're joining in person, and if you have a laptop with the meeting up, just make sure that you're on mute. So mute the laptop, turn the audio off, as it can cause interference. We'll ask that you use the microphones in front of you. You'll see the button, it'll turn red when it's on and hot. When you are speaking, and that will allow for our folks joining virtually, but also for those in the room to hear appropriately and effectively. The red light will be on, and you might have to kind of put your hand over it to see if it's on, but y'all can test going forward. And I will ask that folks mute themselves when not speaking. For those in the room, the restrooms are down the hall. You'll see a sign on the left side. It's a left and then another left. There's also water fountains at that location as well. Any questions about kind of safety protocols and hybrid protocols for today? Okay. So for those joining virtually, and again, you've heard me kind of lay this out, we'll also ask that you stay on mute when not speaking. You can raise your hand to come off mute. If you are on the phone or end up on the phone, you can press *9 at any point to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. I believe we should have closed captioning available. Is that turned on? Yep, if that helps your participation. And then I will add because this is at least my first time in the room, and thank you, Chair Harrington, for this suggestion. If we use name tent vertical raising, I'll interpret that as raising your hand. And of course, if it's easier for you to just raise your hand, feel free to do so, but this will be an effective way to ensure that we get folks in the queue who want to speak. Does that all work for folks? Perfect. So let's dive in. We're going to try something new and just do a roll call to speed up the process, particularly as we started a few minutes late. As a reminder, my name is Ben Duncan. I'm with Kearns & West, your facilitator. And I'm going to walk through names. If you can just say here or present, we will mark it for the record and then go forward. So I'm going to start. Co-chairs, Ebony Brown. Microphone practice too.
I know. Ebony Brown, she, her, Executive Director of Greater Good Northwest and co-chair of this body.
Matt Chapman, do I see Matt not in person? Okay. Mercedes Elizalde. Is that
recording in progress.
Thank you. Michael Liu. Here. Nicole Larson. I think there you are. Yep. Steve Redmond. Here. Sahan McKelvey. How do you say your last name, Sahan?
McKelvey.
McKelvey.
Almost had it right.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'll get it right next time, my friend. Thank you. Christina Palacios. Let's see, Christina. Zoe Capiano. Let's see, Zoe.
Presente.
Sorry, what was that? Oh, yeah, there you are, Zoe, right there. James Schroeder. Yvette Hernandez. Commissioner Jayapal. Here. Chair Harrington.
Here.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Present, Christine Lewis, Metro Council District 2, she and her pronouns.
Thank you. We'll move to our county staff partners. Vahid Brown.
Here.
Yesenia Delgado.
Here.
Jesse Adams.
Here.
Jess Larson.
Here.
There you are. And then Metro staff, Patricia Ross. Here. Liam Frost. Aria Dallin. My team, Kearns West. Thank you. And then last but not least, we will mark present Matt Chapman, if you want to join. Thank you. No, that's totally fine. Bad day for an Uber. Okay, so can we pull up slides so we could walk through agenda?
Also, just for the record, Monte Knudsen is back from Central America, and I'm here.
Sorry, could you repeat what you said?
Monte Knudsen, I'm back from Central America, so you missed me.
Oh, yes.
Bridges the change, he, him pronouns, great to see everybody.
Great, thank you. Sorry to miss you. Oh, yeah, so is that on our end? So can we make a request to turn the Zoom up for virtual participants? And then maybe we can do a couple tests. On our side, yes. I feel like I'm asking, but I don't know if it's happening. Vahid, do you want to say a couple things?
So I don't know if you all can hear us in the virtual space in the room very well. I can hear Ben great, but when you were doing roll call, other folks' here or whatever sounded very faint. I noticed it looked like Chair Harrington leaned into a microphone and her response came through well. So if there are microphones in front of panelists,
Yep.
committee members, perhaps they could use the microphones.
Great, thank you, Vahid. So good reminder, again, press the button to make sure your microphone is on, and don't be afraid of it. So be close as you're speaking. Great, so can we pull up the slideshow? And we'll walk through our agenda. And then I'll pass it to you, Liam, to open us up, but let me start with the agenda. There we go. So we're moving through welcome and introductions. We'll create, as we always do, some space for public comment. We'll get a follow-up update from Metro staff on the research that was requested by this body. And then we'll spend the bulk of our meeting, and in a really, I would say, exciting moment for this group, working through the contributions you all made to the survey to help us prioritize. And then we're going to move into both discussion and some actual voting. And we'll run a process that I'll describe later. You'll see some of it behind me on the board, perhaps, but we'll talk through that. And really hope to walk out of here today with the kind of first attempt for us to put forward strategies that ultimately will turn into recommendations. So this is really an important point in our journey as a body together. I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity we have in front of us. As always, we'll do some closing. We'll talk about next steps. How do we go from what we do today to our next meeting in February? And assuming everything goes right, we'll adjourn at 6 p.m. on the dot. With that, Liam, I'd love to pass it to you for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Ben. Liam Frost, he, him, his, Assistant Director of the Housing Department at Metro. And I just want to welcome everybody in person and welcome everybody online, especially Councillor Lewis, who is now a permanent member of this body as of last Thursday. So welcome, Councillor Lewis, and everybody online. And we're glad to have you back, Monte. It's nice to see your face. I also want to congratulate us for making it all the way to our 5th business meeting. Thanks for sticking with us and thanks for taking a leap of faith in both this very new kind of body as well as a new kind of way of doing our business. And we are trying this new cycle out, this new workflow. And I just want to appreciate the grace with which you have all given us and each other in moving forward with this today. And I just want to point out that what we're doing here is unique. We are regionalizing our response to homelessness and ending people's homelessness across the region. This is something that we've not done before locally, and we're about to do that. And I just want to reinforce what Ben said by saying, in the past 5 business meetings, you've had staff present how staff have begun to regionalize so far. I think the crowning glory in that would be the regional long-term rent assistance voucher, something long dreamed of and now is actually happening. There is a lot more work to do. County staff have also presented challenges and some potential solutions. You all have submitted concepts, ideas, challenges. And I want to remind you that Metro staff, Valeria McWilliams, who could not be here today, unfortunately, get better soon, Valeria, and Kearns and West staff have been capturing everything that you all have been bringing up. As we are colloquially calling it, the Idea Bank is a living document that is going to capture both concepts and challenges, and it will be a living document as we move through each cycle of developing recommendations. I also want to help remind folks that while we've had ongoing discussions, they have been for a purpose, and it's kind of leading up to this next phase. As Ben admitted earlier, he's pretty excited about what's happening today. I'm pretty excited about what's going to happen towards the end of this meeting. And that is dialing down on some concepts that can be turned into recommendations, that can be turned into programs and policies across the region. And so today you're going to make a big leap forward in doing that. It also means that some of those ideas and concepts are going to be left off the table during this cycle. That's just the way things go. It doesn't mean that they will be permanently off the table. We will have another cycle once this one is complete. And the other piece of this that I want to remind everybody of is that we're doing this for the first time. And we're learning as we go. And there will be a quality improvement process at the end of this current cycle. And we will be checking in with everybody about how this has gone, how we can improve, and we can be sure that the next cycle of recommendations will be probably more structured, probably more deliberate, and probably more efficient. And I'm excited for that process too. So I'll shut up now and give it back to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. I could listen to you all day, though, Liam. Well, we have some space for public comment. I'm not seeing, Ebony? Oh, yeah, the minutes. I moved right past it. So December meeting summary. Thank you, co-chair. Do you want to lead us through that process?
Motion to approve December's meeting minutes.
So move.
So you got yep, so motion, Michael, and then Chair Harrington. Yep. And we can vote.
Motion is approved to approve December's meeting minutes.
Oh, we have to vote.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
We didn't vote. We,
So I
yay
think-
or nay, thumbs up, thumbs down?
So thumbs up in the room, if we can see a thumbs up in virtual land, okay? Any opposed or abstentions?
December's meeting minutes are approved.
Great, thank you, and thanks for keeping your facilitator in check over here, Ebony, and on track. So now we will move to public comment. I'm not seeing any in the room, but if anyone is wanting to provide public comment to this body virtually, you can raise your hand using the Zoom function, and we'll promote you to a panelist. Or if someone's on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And I'll ask maybe my colleagues, Ariella, are you seeing any public comment? Okay, just confirming that we don't have public comment in the room. Last chance for those who are joining virtually. Not seeing any? Okay. Well, we will create that space at every one of our meetings, and so if folks are joining, feel free to contribute in the future. And with that, let's move to getting an update on the research project. Do you want a slide up for this? We added a slide, so if we could pull that up, Ariella, I think you're driving, and I'll pass it to you, Liam.
Thanks, Ben. So just a recap from the last meeting. You all had asked Metro staff to basically take a scan of what was out there regionally, along the West Coast, and nationally around landlord recruitment and retention for the purposes of housing vouchers. We've set up meetings with Brilliant Corners and Housing Connector. It took a little while just because people were away for the holidays, but we have those meetings set up. I'll also be talking to Michael Havlick at PSU, formerly of Multifamily Northwest. And we'll also be doing a scan nationally as well, not setting up meetings, but taking a look at different programs and policies in different areas. Our plan is to return to you in February with a written summary of what we have discovered so far. Oh, one additional piece too, before we have the discussion. The counties themselves, Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington, are also submitting what they are currently doing too. Again, as you recall from the filtering criteria, we don't want to duplicate existing efforts. We want to help regionalize those efforts. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Liam. So first, I think there's two pieces to this. One would be, yes, thank you, questions and clarifications. So Steve, please, or comment.
Am I on? I think
Yep,
I am.
You're good.
Thanks, Liam. You know, and I think it's good, deliverable, except I actually feel with professional staff at Metro and with the counties, it's also important for us to kind of get recommendations to consider for actions. So I want to make sure we just don't get the summary. It's, after all the hard work, it's good to kind of get some recommendations on how we could proceed in, you know, working better with the private sector landlords. And so, I mean, it could be one recommendation or it could be several recommendations. It just helps, I think, if they can vet it first. So thanks.
Thank you, Steve. So I will interpret that as a proposed amendment to this scope that would include adding recommendations as part of the scope and outcome for the deliverable. Are there any other questions or clarifications or additions around this proposed scope and deliverable for the ask that you all approved? Chair Harrington?
Hi, can you hear me out on Zoom land?
We can't see them now, but yes, they're giving thumbs up.
Okay,
Thank you.
good, thank you. I'm struggling with something, and let me give you a little bit of context. So we have both the SHS Oversight Committee and we have the Tri-County Planning Body to help us with the real regionalization of our response. And I think a really good piece of news is that for Metro and at least 2 of the 3 counties, you have the same representation in each of those 2 bodies, which means that at least 3 of us are seeing the same information across those 2 bodies. I'm not on the Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee, but I do read their annual reports because our county work folds up to that. And because of my prior history as a Metro counselor, I really appreciate the work of oversight committees. The thing that I'm struggling with and what I'm trying to internalize with Steve's suggestion is how do we ensure that TCPB's efforts are really focused in how do we operationalize regional goals and potential regional response, separate from seeming to duplicate both the question raising and the answering that the SHS Oversight Committee is doing. And so I'm still struggling with that as this group is doing its work. So, part of my strength is working with ambition and clear goals. But also if I'm not clear on something, then I tend to oscillate a little bit. So I just wanted to let you know that it's something that I'm struggling with as I am on the journey together with you. That's all. I'm not asking you to solve my information.
We won't try. Patricia, you want to give some response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harrington, for that thoughtful comment. It's going to be very important that the Oversight Committee and the TCPB are seeing each other and engaging as the work moves along. And I think that happens on a couple of fronts. Number one, as the work of this committee moves forward, we need to engage and bring that information forward, which we've committed to doing with the Oversight Committee, but also vice versa. There will be information and recommendations, pieces of information that will come from the Oversight Committee that really need to come here. So I think it's a relationship between the two committees, and kind of what I'm hearing you point out is making sure that we're clear on our roles and that we're not doubling up or duplicating. And so I think that will be something that we will continue to examine and make sure that we're calling that out when you, so if you see something in particular, please feel free to bring that forward, and let's make sure that we're each properly in our lanes, if you will, but that there is communication back and forth with the committees.
Yeah, thank you for that, Patricia. Matt, please.
Yeah. I think I'm on.
Yep.
Okay. Just to add to what Patricia said, because I think it's really a promising thing. She convened and within Metro, meeting of the co-chairs of each of the three councils. You know, the best way, I think, Chair Harrington, to avoid the dilemma that you raise is for all of us to talk to each other. And I'm really pleased that Metro did that. I felt the meeting was very productive, really, really good faith, good information sharing. And in addition to other processes, my understanding is that those meetings will continue to happen. And I think that's going to make a big, big difference.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So bringing us back into the scoping, because I think to some of what I'm hearing, you know, the results and outcomes of this work may both inform this body, but also could be informing some of the work of other committees. But I do want to hone us back in on kind of the clarity for this agenda item. So with the friendly amendment from Steve Rudman to add, include recommendations as part of the scope and deliverable, do folks have any other questions, comments, points of clarity? Ebony, please.
From Christina, it's to use an equity lens criteria that is in the chat on Zoom.
Oh, great, thank you. So for folks that are virtual, thank you for doing that. I'll just ask that folks flag if you see things in chat. So that's could you repeat? So is that a scope to apply an equity lens to the analysis? Is that the way to say it?
Yes, please. And to every, like when we're voting on what to pass and what not to pass, to use that lens and maybe come up with a criteria that we can use, like, is this part of money supporting BIPOC people, or, you know, things like that. So all of us, we're going to be asked to prioritize many things, but we don't have a guide to use. And I think if we're thinking about using the equity lens, we should really mean it.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. So I would say that that's certainly an amendment to the scope that probably flows through each of the bullet points that are on the screen. Liam, please.
Well, just I wanted to make 2 points, one point of clarity and one in response to Christina. The point of clarity for everybody, this wouldn't just be Metro staff generating this. This would be in collaboration with county staff as well, as we have always done this work. And then in response to Christina, I really appreciate that because Steve is bringing forth a recommendation, that we would need to apply an equity lens as we move forward with any kind of recommendations should this body approve that amendment. So thank you for bringing that.
Great, thank you, Liam. Additional context. I think we can acknowledge that the work will include partnership with counties, but y'all are responsible for the delivery. Okay, Michael?
I just want to make sure we still stay focused on the chronically homeless too, as we kind of come up with our scope for the work. When we started this, we mentioned how 75% of the funds really need to deal with the chronically homeless, and I think as we're moving forward with any recommendations, that has to be brought forward again.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, I'm going to ask that I try to summarize the amendments and suggestions to the scope and deliverable, and ask for approval that will help ensure that Metro and associated parties are able to continue moving forward. Any other points of clarity, questions, or thoughts on what you see here? Mercedes, please.
Yes, so my question is around the equity lens. Does Metro have like an established tool that it already utilizes? Just so that we're clear what the kind of underlying work is when so we're not just saying we use an equity lens, we know what that means.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. Patricia, is that you?
Yes, I will take that. So actually, we have what we have is a framework. I would encourage us to refine and develop a lens that this committee wants to use, or select a particular tool. There are a number of tools that we could also select from that are not necessarily a Metro tool, but just tools that might be appropriate for this work from an equity lens perspective. Does that make sense? So I would suggest we actually carve out some time in the near future to pick a tool that we want to use.
So let's capture the kind of the tool conversation. You know, when you say an equity lens, I think what I heard from Christina in terms of her recommendation was really around ensuring that we're as we do the, you know, to better understand range of services, how is that impacting communities of color? I think to Michael's, or racial and ethnic communities, low-income communities, other vulnerable communities, from an equity perspective. Certainly with a focus on chronically homeless, right? So these undercurrents, as you all do your analysis, need to be built in. And so I would suggest that that's kind of how we're thinking about the amendment, is ensuring that as you're doing this work, as you're conducting that analysis, and as you're developing recommendations, that you have some clarity of focus around the populations that are impacted by this work, and that you're coming forward with recommendations that account for the focus of this body's priorities. Patricia?
Just following up on the framework point, I'm happy to send out what Metro currently has so the group can see that.
Yeah, and just, you know, one more piece, because I think you had raised this before. I mean, in the filtering criteria, we also, I think, say something like, you know, apply equity lens or analyze equity. And so I think that work that you're describing, Patricia, and the ask that you're making, Mercedes, is going to be really important. So we actually understand what the heck we're talking about when we say, you know, consider equity or apply an equity lens. Let me pause. Any last questions, comments, thoughts, clarity? Nobody raising their hand online? Okay. So I'm going to try to read back with some integrity to what I just heard, asking that then we have a vote to adopt the scope and to ensure that the team can continue doing its work. So along with what we have on the screen in terms of the scope and deliverable, we're going to clarify and amend to include several things. One, that we will conduct this work and utilize, quote unquote, an equity lens, or at least to embed equity and equitable outcomes and population served as part of the analysis. The second piece is to ensure that maintaining focus on chronically homeless and ensuring that the analysis specifically speaks to that per Michael's addition. And then the third piece, that the deliverable is amended to include not just a high-level summary, but a summary that includes recommendations. For those that brought forward those amendments, did I accurately capture it for the purposes of today? Any questions from the team that would be doing that work? Does that around clarity? Okay, well then I'll ask around the room if with either a show of hands, a raised tent, or a thumbs up, ask for approval to continue the work and with the scope as amended. Okay, I've seen thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, and online, thumbs up as well. Okay, well, hopefully that provides some clarity for you. Liam?
Just a quick comment. Thanks, everybody. We're about to take on a lot of work in this next month, especially after you all identify some concepts for us to take a deeper dive into to present potential recommendations for you in February's meeting. So that in addition to taking the scan, developing recommendations is going to be a little tight. The good news is that we're about to hire 2 more FTE. I don't mean recruitment, I mean 2 people who have accepted offer letters. So we're very excited about that too.
Thank you for that update. I'm sure that will be a relief for the team, but also for this group to know that we have that additional capacity emerging. Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to pass it back to Liam. We can go to the next slide, and we're going to really spend the next bulk of time starting with the results of the survey. And again, I really appreciate folks' time and energy that you put offering ideas and helping to prioritize. And then we'll work through a process that ultimately will lead us towards next steps. So Liam, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Ben. And from the outset, I want to be clear that this is going to be less of a presentation and more of a recap. These are concepts, ideas that you've become very familiar with. You also I think almost all of you partook in the survey results, and you've all had access to those results in the meeting packet. So I don't want to belabor this. I want to go through each of these slides so that you have reference points mainly. I'm not going to read them out. What I will read out are the comments and suggestions that came along in the survey that weren't ranked. I want to raise those up for people today and make that point because people made those suggestions because people care about this stuff. People have really strong ideas. So let's go to that first slide, please, Ariella. Thank you. As you'll recall from taking the survey, we had 4 broad categories: capacity building, data improvement, regional long-term rent assistance, commonly known as ARLA in my American accent, and systems alignment. So as you see, I'm going to just highlight the top here, which was to support wages and training for service providers, as well as pay compensation for contractors, since culturally specific services are often contracted out. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the previous slide showed the top 4. Here are the remaining ranked results. Under other, I want to raise that folks included prioritize that BIPOC organizations serving BIPOC communities get all the support they need to get up to speed and at capacity, I imagine. The second one is align SHS strategies with emerging housing initiatives under the Oregon Health Plan and coordinated care organizations. The last suggestion here was explore Teach for America style programs for frontline workers. Again, I'd like to remind everybody that even though these are not ranked, and even though they're not ranked, they were suggestions, these can live in future cycles and they will be considered by this body in the future. Next slide, please. Under data, I'm going to read this rather long sentence out that was ranked number 1. Coordinated entry needs to be a service matching tool to incentivize co-enrollment rather than being a queue for the bottleneck. Several of the issues that were identified include data collection, could be improved by having a single coordinated entry system that screens people into services. I'm going to try my best to summarize that in saying that coordinated entry is a potentially really effective tool that could be expanded. Next slide, please. Okay. Under other, we have system mapping for data functions and cohorts using quality assurance methodologies such as, I think it was W. Edwards Deming. Number 2, related to the number 1 priority, we need an integrated and aligned data system that screens people into services, monitors progress / barriers for people receiving services, inventories resources, shelter beds, housing, and connects people to those resources and allows information to be shared across systems. This, to me, really is a technical pitch for regionalizing a lot of the data that county staff and providers are already collecting. Next slide, please. All right, our old friend Arla. Number 1, support a region-wide landlord recruitment program that also provides wraparound services with leveraged funds from the jurisdictions. I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say that this is connected to the request that Steve made at the last meeting and you all just voted on that was amended recently, 5 minutes ago. Next slide, please. Okay. These were the remaining ranked ideas related to ARLA. Thank you. Top ranking concept related to systems alignment. Number one, shared priorities and opportunities for alignment with healthcare systems, including behavioral health. I think implicit in this is the leveraging of the Medicaid waiver. Again, number 4 and 1 seem to be very connected there. Next slide, please. And here are the rest of the ranked systems alignment ideas. As I mentioned, this was less of a presentation and more of a reference point for you all in your next discussion. Ben, over to you.
Great, thank you.
Ben, one more thing. I just wanted to thank Ariella in getting this together and Valeria in my absence over the holiday. It was a big push. It doesn't seem like a big push, but I think it's important to show our gratitude towards staff who really worked hard up until the last day of the holiday to get this out.
Yeah, thank you, Liam, and appreciation for Ariella. So as Liam went through that, we also wanted to create a little space, and I think you stated this, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff on there that we recognize is important to people. And while, the way we've structured today is kind of moving through this conversation to focus on and you're getting a little preview behind me of the type of things that rose to the very, very top. Right, so the way these slides were organized was kind of the top 4 in each of those categories, but amongst the entire survey, there was a few concepts that really rose consistently across the board as kind of the things that were identified as top priority. But we did want to create some space for folks to give life to any strategies that you feel are important to highlight. There's a lot of stuff here, and I don't want to lose the opportunity, and you'll see the way it's framed. I'm hoping for about 10 minutes of conversation. So anything that folks want to bring into the room to say, I recognize this is not a top priority, or this is something that I added and you want to give some life to it, just to give energy and inform your colleagues. And we were pretty deliberate by saying a sentence. I recognize it might be more than one sentence. But our intentionality is to give you just a little bit of space to say, this is an idea that is really important to me, a sentence or two about why, and to Liam's point, right, to inform us as we do these cycles, because we will have future discussions. So I just wanted to create a little bit of that space if there's folks that, are not seeing something that rose to the top but feels really important, or any additional comments that folks have.
So,
please.
Yeah, I mean, I sent out to everybody Monday a proposal that relates to the mapping process, and there's numerous terminology for all of that, but system mapping is probably the most useful. That is what references what I had proposed in December. It's something I am, very, very strongly passionate about, because I believe that by doing that kind of mapping, we enable a good number, actually, of the other really, really good ideas. Unfortunately, there's a glitch, and that recommendation that I made in December did not make it into the survey. So, if it's not in the survey, it cuts into the ranking. So, I don't know what the best process is for here. I want to respect the process that we have. But by the same token, I also think it is really important that we don't just put this aside, because it's something that can be done concurrently with other processes. I made my little pitch as to why I think it's important in the memo that I wrote. So that'll be, if people read that, you can get that point. I won't belabor that here. But I would encourage, and I don't know what the right way to do this is, but this is something that would entail getting an outside facilitator. This is done by people who are very expert in it. I think that what makes sense would be to do 2 of them because of the nature of it. One, to the point that Mike made, is we really need to focus in on those who are chronically homeless, and if we could do a system matching for the services for those folks. Second, there's a point actually Mercedes started, which I also very, very strongly agree with, which is that we really need to examine and identify a way so that there's a common, consistent, effective, efficient way to gather data about homeless people. Probably one system that gathers data and all that, we have multitudes right at this point. So those are two things that I think need to be examined. I think it's really, really important that we operate from a positive view, or excuse me, an effective, honest view, warts and all, as to what it is that we're doing now. So I don't know, Ben, if that's something, you've got your democracy coming up, which is, I think, a really good process, whether that's something that people would be putting dots on if they agree, but I don't think it's on what's behind you, or whatever else the other process might be. So Ben, what would you like to have happen relative to this? Because I really don't want to let it get sidetracked.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't know if it's my answer to respond. But I will say for.
Or Liam, or.
Well, I mean, I think for today's purposes, I mean, I think part of what we wanted to create this space, and I think you've done a good job now, both in the articulation of and sharing of a memo, but also in just explaining why do you think it's important. And I think, going back to, the language that Liam was using around the cycles, I am really wanting us today to hone in and focus on kind of what was prioritized in the survey. Part of the reason I think it felt really important to create this space is so folks could hear in this public venue with your colleagues around the table some passion that you have around it, and I know you've shared that. So, my preference would be to use that as a jumping off point for our next cycle, but I'm not the decision maker on that. So Liam, I'm going to pass it to you, and then Commissioner Jayapal, I'll go to you.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Matt. I just wanted to kind of remind the whole committee here that you Kearns and West, in consultation with us, have created the space in the agenda for dialogue around this. And so my personal expectation wasn't only that, Matt or whomever wanted to bring an issue to the space, but you get to ask Matt some questions about this and have a back and forth. So I just want to invite you all to do that after perhaps Commissioner Jayapal has had her say.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go Commissioner Jayapal and then Mercedes.
Thanks, Ben. I think it's it's not answering either of those questions directly, but
Fair.
Question back. You mentioned cycles a couple of times, Liam. Would you talk more about what a cycle is? Because I think that if we're voting on a strategy for a cycle, I think understanding that would be helpful.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Jayapal. It's a good opportunity to remind folks of the workflow concept that we generated with Kearns and West with the co-chairs back in October. And the idea behind it was the TCPB is charged with developing a regional plan among, I think, 3 or 4 other core responsibilities. And collectively, we came to the conclusion that we didn't have enough time to spend a year and a half developing a plan and then implementing. So the conclusion we came to was to develop a system whereby we would discuss what we're all passionate about, then issue surveys, have more discussion, capture what is coming up in those discussions, and then get to the point, hopefully now in February, where you all decide upon a recommendation. That will then go through the Oversight Committee, then county staff will begin implementing it. We'll begin that all over again. We will have those presentations, we will have that dialogue, and you will identify again another recommendation or multiple recommendations at a time, given the feasibility. At the end of those cycles, it's up to Metro staff then to generate what we're going to call a chapter in the regional plan. So we are going to build the regional plan iteratively through the cycle of generating recommendations over and over again, rather than creating an entire plan and then implementing that plan. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I have a follow-up.
Please.
So when is the cycle? We vote in February on, just as an example, we vote in February on a couple of strategies. When does the cycle begin again? I think yeah.
I'll take the first crack at that answer, and then I'm going to hand it over to my boss. So if we are all able to get to a recommendation or recommendations in February, then it's up to us as staff to develop a proposal that will be voted on by you all. That will likely be April. It'll go to the Oversight Committee, which I hope would be May, which then coincides with the end of the budget cycle for the counties. My hope is that we can start laying the groundwork in terms of implementation by June. That's very aggressive, very ambitious. At the close of that, I'm going to want to do a quality improvement check. I'm going to want to ask all of you how this cycle went so we can improve the next cycle. That's not going to take months. That's going to take a week or two, I believe right now. And then we will kick off the next one. My hope is that it will be a shorter time frame next time, given what we've learned this time, but we shall see. Patricia?
Yeah, thanks, Liam. That was well said. The only thing I'll add is that I think about it as in a rolling process. And when the next kind of cycle, if you will begin, and in part depends on what gets brought forward, right? So there is an element of, there has to be the development of multiple proposals potentially. And so depending on what comes forward and how that discussion moves is in part going to inform when the next kind of round of iteration can start. So it is not a hard timeline. I think what Liam just described well was when we anticipate, I think in a best case scenario, realistic scenario, when things will, for example, make it to the oversight committee who has the role and responsibility of approving whatever the content is that's developed for incorporation into the plan as per the measure. So that's a good way of thinking about the timeline for the work right now, but in terms of, in general, how does the next cycle begin, I think that really is, it depends on what comes forward from the committee.
Yeah, thank you. That was helpful. I'm going to need to process it a little bit because I do think that how those cycles work can play into which strategies we want to prioritize now.
Just to add to that, because I think it's a great opportunity, what we're going to deliver to you in February will address some of that. So let's say you all land on, I don't know, 4 to 5 things at the end of today's meeting. It's up to us as staff to go back between now and February to develop not just what it would look like in practice, but perhaps how long it's going to take to get started, how much it's going to cost. So, and does it serve underrepresented folks and BIPOC communities? You're going to have to weigh all those things together. And sometimes I think you're going to be able to have perhaps 3 run at the same time. But if you all gather around one really big thing, then perhaps it's only the really big thing we can do. Back to what Patricia said, it depends on what you want to do. So you could do multiple things at the same time. You could do one big thing at one time. It will depend on the analysis that we provide to you next February.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take I don't know the order. I think it was Mercedes, Chair Harrington, but Nicole, let's go to you virtually.
Hi, everyone. My question's also in alignment with that. I'm wondering if our recommendations are going to be categorical, like the 4 categories of the survey, where we will simultaneously make recommendations, one on capacity building, kind of a top recommendation in ARLA, et cetera, or if those are going to be in different cycles, or if just kind of how that process is informed, because I think it would be relevant in terms of prioritization if we knew that those were competing with one another, or if they had their own cycle reserved for later, or just kind of functionally how that would happen.
Yeah, thank you for that. Patricia, is that you?
So they're not in competition with one another, and so it really is whatever you want to move forward. I think there will be a bigger discussion on what's short term, medium term, long term, but there are multiple things that can move at the same time. Does that make sense in terms of the categories?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think today, in some respects, I think some decisions were made in terms of how do we get to some really specific focus as part of our trying on of this model, right? To get to a place where we're actually using some process techniques to hone in on where we want to start. And I guess that's, for me, I recognize there's a lot of urgency around this work, but finding a place that we can step into and start felt really important. So we've tried to design it in that way. Let's go Mercedes and then Chair Harrington.
Thank you. So I think part of this is a little bit in response to Matt's recommendation, but also looking at, how many things are on this list that won't, be a priority in the first, second, maybe even third cycles. But recognizing that many of them, in my mind, actually connect to bodies of work that are also existing. And I'm wondering how we can bring some of that information into this space. In regards to what Matt was mentioning, I'm wondering, for example, about the Fuse work being done by Corporation for Supportive Housing and Built for Zero, both of which have a system landscape review as part of those bodies of work. Are there ways to identify where we may actually be asking for something that another body within one of the counties is also working on to help us understand, are we building on top of something that's already being built? Or are we really doing something that is very unique and specific to supportive housing services and what this Tri-County body can do?
Yeah, thank you, Mercedes. Any reflection or thought, Patricia or Liam?
We do have something from Christine in the chat as well, stating it might be a good idea to know what can be funded through the first cycle. This will help us prioritize.
Yes. So adding that layer of funding. Yeah, Liam, do you want to?
So in response to Mercedes's point, in the tool that we're going to use to evaluate the different concepts that you all agree upon, one of them is duplication. We do not want to explore something that's already happening. If something is already happening on the ground, like the Fuse effort, what we will want to do then is consider whether that is regionalizable. I think I just made up a word. That's how we're going to approach that. Does that help?
But that's only for the things that make it to the top of the list. I'm kind of thinking about the stuff we're leaving on the kind of cutting room floor that still may have value in us knowing that that body of work is happening someplace else.
I see.
Yeah, Patricia?
Yeah, we can work on bringing back what's happening. I hear your question. I think it's valid and important in the conversation and in the decision-making process. So yes, we will bring that lens, and what we bring back to you next time is figuring out what information can we bring that's relevant. And if there are particular areas like this, for example, that you would like more information on, it would be helpful if you kind of just shared that with staff, and we'll be happy to get what we can for you.
Yeah, thank you, Liam.
That, and when the next cycle begins, we will be returning to these ideas, and it will be up to staff again, much like they did at the beginning of this one, to present on what's happening out there. Except this next time, we'll have much more of a head start because you all will be more accustomed to working with us. You'll be more accustomed to the work that's actually happening. And so we can go that layer deeper. The Fuse project is such a great example. And back to Patricia's point, if you need more information, we're happy to share that. And we'd like to share it with the whole group as well.
Good, thank you. Chair Harrington? And then Steve?
One of the things that I'm really pleased about with Metro standing up and saying, yes, we'll take responsibility for pulling these 3 counties and Metro together to try and approach this big societal problem together, is that we recognize that we have 3 counties, each starting with a system of response to homelessness in their counties that is still trying to address the big need, in the big unmet need in each of the 3 counties. And as I've been assimilating information through the last few years being involved in this space, I recognize and appreciate the difference of scale, and that in this first year now plus, year and a half of the SHS program, that the teams have really tried to work together and approach things regionally. So having that entry level and trying to have a regional system. But what I don't have a feel for is where we're at now after a year and compared to where our subject matter experts believe we should try to get to. And that entry is just one of the many different points. I want to thank you, Matt, for putting your idea and thoughts into writing, because that helps me understand it. I'm a not only see it and hear it person, but I definitely need to read it, right? There's the visual, the written, and then hearing an explanation. So that has really helped me. I thought the survey was very well done in terms of its implementation. I know I struggled with having what felt like a really difficult time period to address it. So that's not a fault of the survey, right? That's a fault of the calendar. So thank you for I really liked the questions that were asked. I just wasn't able to respond at the level that I had hoped to. But the data provides a gift, right?
Yep.
And my sense is I would like to see us move forward on 2 different strategies and at the same time get going on the system-wide analysis that Matt's proposal talks about, so that we have a better assessment on where we stand individually as well as collectively in our aspiration of responding to the regional homeless need for the chronically homeless and, Group A and Group E. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chair Harrington. We'll come back to some of the comments there. Steve, please.
Yeah, thanks. I actually feel like the glass is getting half full now. And where I feel like that, I think, one, in seeing the Oversight Committee, I believe in the next 6 months, they're going to do the first year report. And we'll be able to see that, and it's iterative between that group and this group. I like the 4 containers. If we could say we had 4 containers. And I think it's really important. I'm not quite sure about the cycle yet. I believe you and I follow you, we'll do that. But I'm going to say long-term and short-term, I do believe. But it's important that we move forward in some ways on all 4 agendas. So here we have landlords and we have the capacity issues for sure. There was also the issue of data, and I think there's lots of data out there and we need to think about, and I think Matt's piece fits into that. We think, what are we trying to measure? Who's doing what? And then the 4th one I think is very important, and that's alignment. And it is the behavioral health system piece. And a lot of work's being done on those arenas too. How do we meet? So this could be put on various burners, if you will, but I believe we need to be able to do all. We have professional staff, we're gearing up. This is an important time. I think we want to be careful we don't throw too many things off, but we kind of look about how we can arrange the work so we can get everything done.
Yeah, thank you for that. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, building on a couple of comments, in terms of the times and the cycles, figuring out, and I forgot who said it, but what we're going to do should be affected at some level by the kind of the natural order of things. And the reason besides being persnickety by nature, that I've really been pushing this so hard is that I view mapping as basically, it's foundational to other things. So putting it off to what if I followed Liam, we would next consider this in July, and then it would take a few months to decide and things like that. Well, in the meantime, hopefully, we've looked at a lot of other things, such as, for example, the data gathering and how it works and all that, but we would be doing it without the benefit of a mapping and an understanding about the nature of what's there. And then remember, we are to operate on a regional basis. So whereas there's some really good work being done in the counties, I'm familiar with some of it, and some of it is just excellent, and a tremendous amount of hard work. But it's just inherently not regional. I mean, that's the counties aren't. And people are working together, lots of cooperation. I think Arla's a great example of that. But the kind of thing that I'm talking about is only done effectively if you look at enough of the system, and it's a metro regional system, to be able to get the perspectives and the issues, because these things cross county lines. So that's why I am concerned. I don't have a solution for this. I really need to look to the county, or excuse me, to Metro and the counties for how we would do this. My suggestion had been to have Metro undertake this. I don't know if that works or not. We are not in a position to do, we cannot dictate that. We should not. We actually don't dictate anything, which I think is a good structure. But, I would hate to see us wait 6 months to consider whether or not we're going to do something that I personally find extraordinarily fundamental and necessary in the steps to be able to carry out the other things that we're going to decide to do.
Yeah, thanks, Mercedes. I want to move us on. I mean, I think you heard some commitment from Patricia to at least start examining per what Mercedes was saying, kind of what's currently there. And I think this is a necessary conversation around what does it look like, or what could it look like to explore this concept of system mapping. Mercedes, I'm going to go to you, and then I want to move to an exercise, right? Because I think we got to walk out of here today with some action. So please.
Yeah, so I think that's actually the point that I was kind of moving towards making, is that I think some of the system mapping is actually a step for some of this other work to occur and doesn't necessarily need to be a project in and of itself. And so I think I'm hoping that the staff can stay open to that idea, right? Because one of the recommendation, or the top one that was under the data and standards, was about using coordinated entry as a service matching tool. We would need to do some service mapping in order to successfully do that. And, the VI SPDAT is something that other communities have already moved away from. There's a lot of recommendations under America Home, which for whatever reason, our local governments have chosen not to participate in, no judgment, whatever the decision was. But that is really pushing a lot of communities to be thinking differently about how they're connecting people with services. And so maybe one of the things we're thinking about in that next step around feasibility is that maybe this mapping is actually part of some of these projects and not just a standalone project.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Patricia?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I was going to just clarify, like to say, what I'm hearing you say is that this is part, like a vehicle to be able to accomplish some of the recommendations that are coming forward, and that is absolutely appropriate. I think that is 100% something that staff would want to consider as part of any proposal.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask that we move on. That was a robust conversation. I feel like it could go much longer. There's a couple immediate edits. I want to, if we could bring this, I don't know if Ariel, I'm asking you to do too many things at the same time. So I'm going to talk through a process, and then we're going to make a real-time amendment to, based on some of what we've heard today, because it does seem important. And Nicole, I think you made a really good point, and others I think raised this as well, is actually looking not just at these two, so we had initially thought like these are the two areas that through the survey really was where the most energy was. But I think what we're also hearing in the comments and vision that folks have shared is that it seems important to also have and Steve, you made this point, right? There's 4 categories, right? Let's have the top from all 4. So we're gonna make that immediate amendment. I don't know if anybody caught Ariel giving me the side eye when I was like pulling up slides, but I'm gonna talk about the process. We're gonna add the highest votes from the other 2 categories, and then we're gonna do a dot exercise to see what emerges, right? Because I think then it honors, it will honor both the top priority overall for the survey, but it also doesn't leave categories out that feel really important. Chair Harrington, please.
I don't understand what the third bucket is. I understood 1, 2, and.
I think it's data and system.
I hear that word data. What kind of data? And data for what, right? You can't work towards systems alignment and mapping of a system if you don't have data. So that's why I'm trying to figure out what is 3, and I understand what 4 is.
Yeah. Well, let's, Patricia, you want to talk through it, and then I'll talk through the process that we want to use.
Yeah, so the way that I'm thinking about this is a reflection of the survey categories. And so it's a dot exercise of the categories as they were in the survey. Does that make sense?
Jess?
I can help.
Thanks.
Patricia, is about the 4 buckets, and the third one being generally called data, but what does data include? Because the chair is saying data's in everything, and we need data to do all of these things. I think I'm not sure if I captured that correctly, Chair.
Well, part of what I'm dealing with is, okay, we got these survey results. So I'm looking at page 8 of the 40-page packet, and all the sentences are cut off, okay? And I know I can see these things up on the wall. I don't know if the people out on Zoom land can. We saw presented to us slides that had the complete sentences, but that wasn't in the packet. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, I can see where these 6 are in these things on page 8. Where's data?
If you look on the meeting packet that was sent out last week ahead of time, starting on actually page 2 after last week's.
Wait. That's the problem right there. My inbox is a mess. So I went to the Metro website for the meeting packet for this meeting. So
That's the same link I'm using.
thank you.
Yes.
I'm with you then.
Yes.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have been on the journey.
So if you look on page 2, right after last meeting's notes, that is where the data begins, the data results from the survey begins. And it actually has.
Yes, that's PDF page 8, question 2, right?
I'm looking at it on the actual link.
So while you're, Ariel, do we have the ability to print out? So can I
which
ask folks
one's
just
data?
to pause for a second, so Mercedes, you can help navigate that. Do we have things ready to print out? Okay, can we pull up the slides again and go to the survey results so you can actually look at the top 4? And we're gonna print those out and put them on the wall. So let's remind folks, so we don't have to kind of go through trying to figure out where it is in the packet, but good job finding that so quickly. Let's see if we can get slides back up, and then we'll print those out. Commissioner Jayapal, as we're doing that, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Yeah, it's on now. I just, Chair Harrington, I wonder if, just talking about data as a bucket.
I think there's some distraction. Well,
Thank you.
so go on, Commissioner Jayapal, and then I want to use the slides just to bring it in, and then I'm going to ask folks to give us a couple minutes, and then I'll talk about the process, and let's actually dive in and do some voting. So please, Commissioner.
As I understood it, the category of data was to say what strategies would help us manage data? Like what kinds of things should we be doing around data collection? And so that was I think what that survey question was getting to. And I want to echo, while I have the mic, while other things are happening, I do want to echo what I think I heard both Mercedes and Chair Harrington say, which is I agree with Matt that this data mapping piece is, and sort of system mapping is kind of foundational, and that it's not a strategy, right? It is support work. So I just want to put a point on what I think I heard you say, Patricia, which is that we will do that. That will be part of the support work that Metro will do.
Yes, thank you. Patricia.
Right, so exactly. And what we would do as a follow-up from these conversations is counties and Metro working together to bring back some ideas. And that's where these tactics, if you will, to advance the strategy would be seen. So, yes.
So when this is how the survey framed, and these are the top choices reflective of this quote-unquote data. Folks talked about a single coordinated entry system, right? But really, it's the tool that helps match and eliminate the queue. That there's a standardization of data collection methods. So when we're talking about data, it's a practice. That there's consistency in evaluation. So we're talking about data in terms of evaluation standards. and that there's advised or there's improved communication of outcomes. We're talking about what is the data that tells the story to the public to increase awareness. So again, that's data. What's the other one was Arla, right? And then the other category, and we'll be printing these out in a second. These support a region-wide landlord recruitment. Create centralized, right? These are the top things under that category. So that's the amendment to our process, because I think we heard you loud and clear. Hopefully Liam and is figuring out how to print. So I'm going to talk about what we're going to do next in the last 45 minutes that we have together. Again, reminding ourselves that this is, we're not going to be able to take on 16 things at once. So we are going to be provided with some dots, little sticky dots. For those that are virtual, we'll be sharing a virtual whiteboard, so you'll have this information. And you can use sticky notes, and we can talk through that, and we can provide some tech support if you need that. We're going to start with a little bit of discussion for clarity. A little bit of discussion for clarity. If there's something on the wall that you're like, I don't know what that means, you can ask that question. We wanted to create a little space for advocacy, but I'm going to actually just scrap that and ask that you just talk about it amongst yourselves when you're there. What does this mean? Why do you think that's important? We'll use the process to do that. We also are not going to create any space for poo-pooing. Okay? This is not the filter. You can say that I love this idea. I don't care if it takes 100 years. I don't want us to start eliminating things. I want you to vote on it based on what you're interested in, what you think would and should be prioritized for our first set of recommendations. So from that, you will start seeing with your votes, this group is going to make a collective decision to say, here are the things that we think are most important to begin to work on that will inform our process going forward. Steve, you're moving around and shaking around, so please.
I'll do it, but I mean, I want to make sure this is not science. I mean, and the dot exercise is helpful as a kind of, an opinion today. We all have. We haven't really been deliberated. What I'm getting at is I could put all the dots on one thing, or I want to kind of look at all four. And then this is what I'm trying to say. To me, I think of short-term, long-term. And I don't want to, unless we're just saying, what do we have to do for short-term? Maybe that's one way. But I don't know. I mean, I don't like, I hope I'm not forced or asked to put them all on one thing.
No, you're not forced to put, you can put your dots wherever you want. Now,
I'm not sure. Okay. I mean,
trust
I'll
the
deal with it.
process. Can I ask you to trust the process, Steve, and see where we land coming out of it? Because I do think those are the questions that we will have to ask, right? Are we really going to make this recommendation if it's going to be 7 years from now? That's the next part of this conversation. I'm trying to understand, and I want this group to be able to collectively make the decision by voting to say, I'm really interested in this. This seems really important. And between now and February, as Metro and the county start bringing back the information for our next conversation, we can actually filter with some of that deliberation. But I don't want us to start removing things that folks have already said is important because it's going to take too long, or because we don't think it's politically palatable, or because it's, it's complex, or it's going to cost too much. I don't want that to be our conversation today. So I'm really going to try to push you all to use and trust this process, and we will iterate and we will evaluate for quality improvement. So Patricia, I'm going to go to you, and then I really want us to dive in.
Okay, I'm going to throw a wrench, sorry.
No.
But, so I just want to clarify, because I think we're doing a real-time amendment and adding the other two categories to the discussion with their top three, as we were discussing earlier, so that's coming. So I want to make sure that that gets reflected. And in doing so, what I'm hearing you, Steve, call out is that you could choose tops for all of them, right? Make choices of any of the categories. And so I think that that's something we should honor if that is what the committee would like to do.
Yeah, did I say something different? I think you can put your dots wherever you want, right? Well, I think, I don't know, originally it was a shorter amount. Let's give you 4 dots. So you can prioritize 1 dot in one space, or you can put 2 dots wherever you want. Let's see where we land. Chair Harrington, please.
So I understand the idea of 4 buckets, and underneath the 4, there are multiple strategies. And I appreciate this being a prioritization, right? What I think I might have heard wrong is when Commissioner Jayapal was mentioning landlord unit capacity, buckets of 1, 2, data is 3. I thought I heard a articulation of the system mapping being done concurrently to pursuit of strategies under those 3 buckets.
I think that's accurate. I think
Okay.
if I don't want to
I
speak
get
for you,
it.
Commissioner, but yeah,
Okay.
that it was not necessarily a strategy in and of itself, but it was something to inform structurally the process.
I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay. Michael? Y'all are
It seems like
pushing
we're
me.
all agreeing that some type of system mapping is needed throughout this whole process. Can we just remove that, since that works concurrently with everything else? And then we focus on the other 3 parts
Yes.
of it, and that's like, it's a dollar amount, right? I think you said $50,000 to do this. Can we as a body go like, that's a good use of 50,000, let's.
I don't know if
Or-
that's there, but I'll look to Metro in terms of, I don't think this body has the authority to direct Metro to
Well,
spend internal dollars, but.
Yeah, if I could here, so because, I just want to, so this is now under the umbrella of the TCPB regional work, right? So because it is the TCPB regional work and a system mapping or any expense that is related to these could be voted on from the regional investment fund that is set aside from the 3 counties. So there is money for that. It would not be a Metro expense in terms of our operational budget. But the committee could, so let's say we come back and we say, well, this is how we would execute or recommend moving forward. It includes a system mapping, it's X amount of dollars. The committee could say, yes, we want you to move forward and make this investment. So, but that would be out of the Regional Investment Fund, which is the set aside for this work. Hopefully that helps clarify.
It does. I mean, I think, so can we come back to that? I mean, I think there is agreement, and maybe this is work that Metro has to come back and say, like, building off what Matt provided, what is the scope of what that would look like, and agree how that's going to happen. So
So-
Patricia, and then Matt, I'll come back to you.
Right, so to answer your question from here, after we get direction, if you will, you vote, hopefully at the end of today, there's a set of things that you say, these are the things that we want to move forward on. And so then Metro with the counties will do some work to say, here are some next steps, here's how that could look. And part of that would be a system mapping that will be incorporated into that. And so that's kind of how that would move forward, but it would be a next step with the jurisdictions.
Okay, so Matt, that alleviates your question. So let's come back to that as part of the way we close this meeting. Hopefully, we'll be approving our first set of strategies that we want to further explore. And we'll take a vote on the action around a system mapping concepts. Does that work? Yeah? Yeah. For online folks, any thoughts, reflections? Thank you, Ebony.
Sorry, just
One more.
not to belabor this, I'm so sorry. I don't think we need an action today on the system mapping. What we're saying as staff is that we will come back to you with the broader proposal, and this will be incorporated in that. But for today, I don't think that is necessary. We'll bring back a proposal to you.
Okay, so for the record, we'll just we'll accept that is an action. Matt, now your card's up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to concur with what Patricia said. I mean, this accomplishes what I was after. It's not trying to give an edict or a request or whatever the hell to Metro, but I just feel it needs to be part of and foundational too. And I'm hearing, so correct me if I'm wrong, that staff will do that as part of the responses that come up in February, and I think that's the right thing. So I appreciate that, and I think that's a very constructive approach, and I don't think we need to do any kind of a vote.
Great, well, you've made your point. I think we have some action. Chair Harrington?
Can I just ask, I've been able to look across the room at the other in-the-room attendees and see head nods. I haven't been good about watching the screen to see how our hybrid attendees out in Zoom land think about having the systems alignment concurrently with what will rank as the other strategies.
Yep.
So it goes back to the question of, can we hear from them?
Yes.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
they're comfortable with that.
I just asked Ben to do a temperature check.
Yep, so Nicole, I see your hand raised, and let's do this, and then we'll take 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to get situated. We'll get you out your dots, and then we'll go through the process. So Nicole?
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I think being able to have all 4 categories that were emphasized in the survey makes sense in terms of being able to allocate prioritization. And we can't see online yet the wall behind you, Ben. So
Yep.
whatever you're putting up in terms of how you're going to do the exercise in person, I'm just would love to be cognizant of how we can, I'm sure you've thought of it, how we
Yeah.
can be participate in that from online. So
We're going to share a tool, and we'll give some direction there. We're going to take a break and then for just 2-3 minutes, and we'll get situated so we can get into this exercise. Ebony?
Yes, from the chat, we have Monta and we have Zoe and Sahan that say that they are comfortable with this.
Thank you for utilizing the chat, and thank you, Co-Chair Brown, for monitoring that. So, Patricia?
But I think one of the questions that was asked, Nicole, so there is an electronic mirror board for these 2 categories is going to be shared here shortly.
Okay, can we take 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Let's take 3 minutes, and we'll, yeah, there's a link in the chat that you can click on. It's a mural board. You can also, Ariel, you're tracking the chat. If folks have any questions about it, it's a relatively intuitive technology, but you'll see it laid out with exactly what you're going to see on the wall. It'll have the top 4 choices or top 3 that emerge from each of the categories, and there'll be a bunch of little pre-populated sticky notes that you click on and you drag. And that would be one mechanism to do it. If you have any problems, just chat Ariella your top votes. Does that work for folks? All right. Yes, it's going great. All right, let's come back at 5:33, and we'll get set up.
So thank you for Thank you.
Some things like legislation, sausage, it's never come to mind.
Oh, okay. Old-fashioned thought exercise.
Yeah. So how many dots do we get?
We're waiting for them to give us.
Like that is the not.
Yeah, the ultimate count.
How many dots do we get? Okay.
Oh. Okay.
Here's the
Okay,
page,
so here-
but I'm only allowed to use 4.
Okay, ready for the next dumb question?
Yes.
Let's say,
Well, colors don't matter.
okay.
You get to choose if you put all your dots on one. You get to distribute them however you want.
Okay, that was, it's not always been the case. I Yeah, as I say, you come back, I can tell you.
Technical person, I need help. And maybe I need to go back to the Zoom later. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. So for folks that are online, looks like I'm seeing sticky notes being allocated. Once you've done it, you've added your 4 stickies, if you could just chat done, so we know that you've completed the exercise, because I don't know how well we can track who's done it. And then we will transfer your sticky dots to the board, the live paper. You can keep it as a memento.
No, so you can apply either this stuff there or that stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna move that stuff to here.
But then they won't be able to see it.
Oh, that's true.
But if you do it the other way around, we'll both be able to see it.
That's true. That's true. You hear that, Ariel? Oh. Well, what we can do is we'll move these to the mural.
It's right now. Oh, welcome. Thanks for reading it. Assuming you did.
Good to see you. I like this in the room energy.
You want a tallier for help Ariel out with putting it transferring it to Mira?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I think, yeah.
I'll do that.
I don't know if everybody's voting yet. Yeah.
And for those online, in the room, we're only voting on the top 3, so go ahead and ignore that bottom row of number 4s.
I don't know how to unlock. It's telling me I have to unlock something.
It might be. That would be fascinating, right?
I'm sorry, Christina, was that you?
Yeah, that was me. It says I have to unlock. Or maybe it will let me do it now. Nope.
Are you locked out of the mural board?
I don't think it's gonna let me do it. Let me see.
Okay, you can move one of the stickies from the bottom up to your place of choice, or you could just chat me your top 4 and I can place the sticky note for you.
It's hard to chat by capacity, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, that's hard to manipulate.
Okay. the screen move? Oh, yeah, there you are. Thank you.
Has everybody voted in the room? Yeah, that's real. That's real. Has everybody in this room voted?
Nope, I'm not done yet, sorry.
Okay, but you're working through
No,
it?
I'm not done.
Okay. But the people in the room have put their dots on. Have you then added these yet? Okay. Yeah, Newey's gonna tally and help you out. It's interesting. Things are seeming to.
Does anybody want me to
Coordinated entry.
Would it be helpful for the folks online if maybe I went around with my laptop so everybody could see the in-person?
Yes.
Yeah, the moving around on the screen and moving the screen back and forth throws me out.
Okay, so yeah, just.
Okay.
That's all right.
Why do I have 4 dots?
Uh-oh, oh boy.
Do not let me break the
This is,
Doc.
This is what happens, election integrity.
Yeah, all right.
There's ballots. Ballots that are,
Oh, wow.
Christina, when you say 3 for 3 and 1 for 1, which category exactly are you talking about?
The capacity strategies.
Okay, got you.
All right, so for folks in the room, as soon as we have completed the virtual contributions, we'll tally up, and then we'll see where we're at. really, as much as I wanted to wring a couple necks, as y'all were taking me in a whirlwind, I really have appreciated this process. So we're getting to a good place. So we have our elections crew working valiantly behind the scenes to count ballots. Well, maybe while we're doing this, Liam, you want to talk about next steps, like what's going to happen between now, January and February, before our next meeting?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Jess Lawson and I were just discussing that during the break. We are going to be working rapidly, and when I say we, I mean Metro staff and county staff together to take what you have all dotted out tonight and to turn that into potential proposals that have timelines. Potentially, we're going to identify challenges, the opportunities with each of those for your consideration at the next meeting. Ebony, you have your name tent raised and a big smirk.
Sorry, it was a smirk at my own
Okay.
failures, but I was just wanting to point out, Christina had a question before we got into that about standardized data collection, and I wanted to make sure that we pointed Christina in the right direction.
Thank you.
So Christina, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, well, it's more like a concern. When I saw this on prior to this meeting, I on data collection, sometimes I always think about like who collects the data and how it gets collected. A lot of the BIPOC community never sees their voice being heard. And also the outreach that happens to get data collections from the BIPOC community is very Americanized. I'm gonna say I don't like to use the word, but it's not cultural specific, is what I'm trying to say. So that's what I have a big concern about. That I do like that there is a standardized data collection methods.
Yeah.
I will be interested in exploring like the type of methods use. Like, is there one that really integrates the data that needs to be showcased, or is just gonna be this big data company, sometimes out of state, that I just don't like? I don't believe in their data.
Yeah, thank you for articulating that. I think we can see where that number 2 under prioritization lands. If that becomes something that, based on tallies, is one of the uppermost choices, I think what you just brought into the room is exactly the conversations that this group needs to have as part of its deliberation. We wouldn't just say standardized data collection, but we would explore that concept with clarity, with intentionality around some of the potential impacts, both positive and negative. So I think, Christina, you're giving us a preview of the type of conversations that this group will need to have. Let's go. Matt, do you have a question around this piece?
Yeah, I just want to thank Christina for that question. And I can assure you from experiences I've had in other technologies working in education, that can be addressed very, very well. And the key is, it's really almost wrong to say standardization in that sense. That implies everything's done the same. Not necessarily. What it is consistency of the data. That does not mean consistency of what the caseworker or the frontline worker and the person being interviewed see. That needs to be specific. So
Yeah,
I think it's
that's
an
fair.
outstanding point.
Yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize it.
Thank you. Again, I think illustrations of the type of conversation that this group will be having going forward. So Liam, do you want to continue talking about, I don't know where you got cut off, probably right as you started
No,
talking.
as pretty much right at the end. The point is that we are going to deliver to this group in February preliminary recommendations for your consideration, where we will expect you to vote on formal recommendations next month. We will be hard at work over the next few weeks.
Yeah, so it's really trying to set you all up to be able to have the exact to ask those type of questions, to be able to deliberate, and ultimately to put something forward. So is our TCPB elections clerk, do we have a sense of kind of what we're looking at here? Do we have numbers attached? Ariella, maybe I'll ask you as our resident clerk.
I just want to confirm if Yvette has a chance to vote. And then Christina had another item in the chat where she said, and one more concern is on strategy number 2. I think I am the only one that voted on it. And I will think that if we were using equity lens, I hope more people will vote on it.
For number 2, expand system capacity.
I meant number 3.
Oh, it's
Capacity strategy number 3.
under data, for evaluation standards. Okay, I mean,
No, the build and expand system capacity for cultural specific housing and services providers.
okay, well, you're not the only one that voted for it, but it doesn't look like, well, let's look at the numbers, but you're not the only one. And I think as Liam said before, and I recognize that one of the drawbacks of this exercise is that we can't pick everything. And that, things that you may feel are really important or that you're really passionate about, may not rise to the top at this moment. But I think, we don't want to lose over time all these strategies. So let's go Ebony and then Mike.
But let me clarify, I used 3 of my dots on this one. So when I look at it the first time, it was only me, and now I see one more. That means that only 2 of us voted, and I get what you're saying. I just think that is why it's important that we have a criteria for equity lens and that we're all using it.
Thank you for that. So let's go, Ebony, Mike, you're down. Okay, Ebony, then Mike. Ariel, do you have context first, though?
Zoe has her hand raised online.
Okay, so let's go, all right, let's go Zoe, then Mike. Is that all right? Zoe?
Yes, I just want to clarify as a person of a different culture and seeing clearly Christina's point. First, I want to support the wages and training with my 4 points that I have. And based on that, provide that cultural specific organizations with that framework of wages that match everybody in it, every other organization. As a nonprofit, the cultural specific organizations that are starting up, we start up with wages that are not compatible with others. So I feel like we should first align that this work is going to be well paid, because our homeless population deserves to have a person for a long time working with them. And I have seen that we have a lot of turnover, and that's not trauma informed, and that's because the wages are not okay for the work that our staff are doing, and they need the support. Because the population, our homeless population needs also that's long term, somebody that work with them long term, and that's only less turnover. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for giving some life to that. So let's go, Mike, and then Ebony.
Yeah, I think everyone brought up good points online. For me, a lot of these felt like branches off of what the overarching issue will be, and they're part of the solution to that. So though I didn't put a sticker on those, I think that's going to be part of the recommendation I'm hoping that will come across when we address whether it's wages or, you know, the system-wide landlord or whatever the other issue is. It looked like some of the other answers, and that's where I struggled with this exercise. A lot of them were so interrelated that it just didn't, where we put the sticker kind of didn't matter as much.
Well, I think that's, you know, as staff behind the scenes does the work, I think that'll be an important piece to hold, right? Are you seeing and are there connections to some of the other strategies? Let's go Ebony and then Patricia, or do you have a response? Okay, Ebony, please.
I want to thank Christina and Zoe for bringing these things up. I do want to say, in the essence of being transparent, that there is a slight difference between what you guys are seeing on screen and what we are seeing here in person as far as what's on the wall. Yeah, so 1, 2, and 3. So for 3 on the screen, I believe it says to build and expand system capacity for culturally specific specific housing and service providers. And here on the wall, it says build technical assistance capacity for emerging service providers. So I just want to say that I felt here voting for number 1, that would kind of tie into what you guys are seeing on screen for option number 3 under prioritization and capacity strategies.
It's a good eye. I can't see that far. I need some. Oh, yeah. I was like, my goodness. Yeah, it is. Well, Patricia, go first.
So just wanting to comment on some of the recommendations to focus on racial equity, and absolutely that has to be center in any strategy that we are moving forward with. So again, assuming that you vote today to move some strategy, wanting us to do some work on some strategies and come back to you, one of the things we'll talk about is how we are applying an equity lens to any of these strategies. And so that is part of the filtering tool, or that thinking of what key questions are we asking when we're putting together any proposal for this group to consider. And the second piece that I just wanted to raise is from one of the things that I'm seeing here is that you have provided us with a lot of insight and direction just by virtue of this exercise. And there are pieces that connect, and we as staff will be looking for those opportunities to collapse pieces that maybe are not even here today. So like really trying to look for connecting the dots as much as possible and looking for the highest level of opportunity when we bring a proposal to you. So I just want to say it isn't just in this room. I think you've given us a lot to work with to think about how we incorporate these pieces that are related, Michael, to your point, and how do we reflect that in a proposal when we bring it back.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Ariella? Or actually, before you go, Manta, Nicole, I think you had stuff in the chat. Can you give some life to it?
Yeah, are you calling on me or Nicole?
Yeah, you're live.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I can do this in 1 minute. I just wanted to make a couple quick comments. One on capacity strategies. It's going to be important that we think about organizations when we think about increasing pay. Organizations have multiple funding streams, oftentimes through multiple divisions of the county or the state. Increasing pay from one contract causes huge pay equity issues within organizations, especially larger organizations who have multiple contracts. So I would just suggest that when Metro is analyzing this, that they have HR leaders at the table to understand what the impact would be if they were going to raise contract rates in one place and not others. Lastly, on capacity, just to think about, as an organization right now who's launching like 202 new beds and 67 staff through M110, it's not always like giving organizations support to launch those new programs so we can get them up quickly. It's also looking at it reasonably of like, are we putting unreasonable expectations on organizations to launch things quickly? So from a capacity standpoint, it doesn't always have to be the lack of resources. It can be unrealistic expectations from funders.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, another preview of the conversations, both the work that the Metro and the counties will do, but also the conversations we'll have in subsequent deliberation. Nicole, and then I'm going to go ask Ariella to give us an update on numbers. Liam, and you and Patricia have your cards up. Can I come back to you? All right. Nicole?
I was just quickly wondering for those of us online if it would be possible. Our large screen that we see is just what we voted as the online members. So it would be great if somehow we could see a visual of what those of you in the room voted on, what those stickers are reflective of, because we can't see that.
Yeah, Ariella?
I did add the stickies into the room onto the board. So what you're seeing has been reflected.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you.
We have merged. Okay, so my these old eyes can't see. I mean, I can kind of see what's emerging. Certainly, that whatever that says, the wages is certainly something that has risen to the top. I can't count the numbers. Certainly, coordinated entry looks like it's reached. What's the first one under Arla? Landlord recruitment. And then what's the number one under system alignment?
Shared priorities.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Jump in. I don't know who's talking.
It was me, Sally.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we can have a coordinated entry system if we don't have a regional coordinated entry, if we don't have a standardized data collection.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say is don't poo-poo. Don't poo-poo ideas. I think that's part of the analysis that needs to happen, right? And that's part of what this body will have to ultimately deliberate is what's the sequencing of recommendations that make sense in order for one thing to lead into the other. So a great point. We're right at time. So I'm going to ask the group if you have comfort moving forward the top prioritization from each of these categories as an initial review, or would you want to advocate for any of the other ones that should be included in this first section? My proposal would be, let's start with the top four. Steve, you have a thought?
Well, I mean, I think I would like to see staff take it. We all said that there's a relationship between some of them. So, for instance, in each strategy, there might be a way the staff comes back and combines it.
Yes.
Which is fine with me.
I agree. Are folks okay with that direction to staff between now and the February meeting, starting with for each category, the top receiver of votes, with the caveat that staff would also be looking, and I think it's been raised in several ways, that if some of these things link with each other, that's part of the analysis. If something has to happen before something else, that's part of the analysis. And I would assume, because I've heard it several different ways expressed, that there's also some analysis of kind of the timelines that would be related to each of those. Does that work? Chair Harrington, please. Oh, Matt, sorry, I didn't see your card.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Please.
I'm comfortable with that, but in any of the four categories, is there a situation where there are two that are very close to each other near the top, in which event we might want to go within a category?
I mean, I think that was the question. I mean, you could argue maybe number two under data. But I guess I want to go back to, in some ways, respect what Liam said earlier. Oh. and
Yeah,
there's no.
if that's the case, then
Okay.
that works.
Thank you, Chair. So let me try to close this out with what I think I heard. Oh, you do, sorry. Thank you, jump in, Chair.
So, what, as, in terms of the next steps, taking the top strategies, it just so happens that number-wise, the top one in tier 1, the top one in tier 2, the top one in tier 3 are the top 3. I think the top one
Of data.
Okay, the top one in all 4 categories is the first one, okay? Oh, thank you for pointing. Thank you. I apologize to the folks on Zoom. I was not successful in turning on my mic the first time. Observation, the first strategy in each of the 4 buckets is the top one across each and captures all of the top 4 across the whole collection. My question is this, and I'm comfortable with
Yep, thank you.
doing that next view for February. What I'm going to be interested in hearing in February, I'm making an assumption that there is only so much staff capacity to move forward on the systems mapping and 2 of these strategies in our first cycle, whether the cycle is the next year or some other time frame. So what I'm going to be interested in closing out of with the next meeting is at least which 2 strategies are we going to move forward with in addition to that systems mapping?
That's fair.
Assuming we only have staff capacity for 2.
Well, I will ask, so let me try to close this out, because we're over time, and I appreciate folks just giving a couple seconds here. So for next steps, the things I've captured, one is the amended scope and deliverable based on the initial proposal, and we approved that. The system mapping, and so really coming back to this body with a frame for how to move that forward. And then this third piece, starting with the top votes under each of these 4 buckets to refine and bring back for context and clarity and deliberation at our next meeting. And some of the guidance that I think hopefully y'all are hearing that we want to capture is that we want to understand where some of these things are intersected or where some of the connections are. That we want to have some sense of timelines, and that I think it's going to be important for Metro to be really transparent about its capacity and what it can take on. Patricia?
Just wanted to make a point of clarification. I'm not interpreting the system mapping to be a standalone. And so we weren't planning on coming back with how that system mapping is going to work. And what I was thinking is that we're going to come back with initial proposals of how to advance the top priorities. And in that, we will address the system mapping component as a mechanism to be able to advance the strategy, if that makes sense.
I think that's fair, and it's recorded, and we're capturing it, and it will be in the meeting summary, so we can confirm and clarify in the future if, with that. So you're giving a thumbs up. Are folks good with what I captured? Good moving forward? You feel all right?
Yes, and it looks like we have a thumbs up from Sahan, Manta, Christina, and we're waiting for Nicole and a few others.
Okay. Let's give a nod. Well, I'm proud of y'all. Good work. This was a productive and a really important pivot point for us. So one of the other things as we go through this process, this is kind of a pilot for how we hope to do this work. So any reflections and thoughts that you all have about the process, please feel free to share. But we'll be more intentionally evaluating that over time. So thanks for the extra 8 minutes or so.
I'm impressed with
The real-time stuff.
Kearns and West's ability to help us do something physically in person and electronically.
Yeah, and shift in real
Good
time,
job.
start printing out things, make new decisions. Y'all pushed us in a great direction. I think, and for the benefit of the work, I think we landed in a really good place. Patricia, do you want to offer any closing thoughts as we go?
Well, first of all, thank you for hanging in there with us, doing the exercise of an old school dot exercise. I know we're all out of practice, but I really appreciate the thinking, the dialogue, and I think I'm very excited. I hope you are too, and recognize that this is a really important moment in our work where there's some clear priorities, and so now we as staff are really excited to get to work and come back to you with some proposals. So thank you all.
I'd like to echo that and thank everybody for being here, both in person and online, and being respectful to each other and listening to each other. And yay, we're making steps.
Thank you.
So, in terms of that last thing, so long as the system now,